My name is Josephine, 34 years old, and the legacy I helped build almost crumbled when my own family decided I was disposable. After all those years of sacrifice, my sister Olivia smiled as my parents erased me from what we created together. Your sister? She doesn't deserve a dime. She's out, my father declared during that fateful dinner, his voice cold and calculated. The statement hung in the air like a death sentence while Olivia nodded in agreement, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her wine glass. We've decided the company will be transferred solely to Olivia, my mother added, not even looking me in the eye. The family estate will follow the same arrangement. They thought I'd accept it quietly as always, but this time they went too far. The consequences went beyond anything they could have imagined. Before continuing my story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Like and subscribe for more family secrets nobody tells. I remember walking into Hartwell Industries that morning feeling optimistic. The family business had grown from my grandfather's small manufacturing plant into a respectable mid-sized company with over 200 employees. I'd spent 12 years there, working my way up from the warehouse floor to operations director. Not because of my last name, but despite it. My father, Richard Hartwell, believed in earning your place, at least when it came to me. For Olivia, 3 years my junior, the rules were different. She'd waltzed in after business school with a corner office and a VP title. That morning, I'd finished the Porter contract, a deal I'd been pursuing for 18 months. It would increase our annual revenue by 20% and create 40 new jobs. I wanted to share the news with my father in person. He's in a meeting, said Diane, his assistant of 20 years. With Olivia and the board. The board? There wasn't a meeting scheduled. Diane looked uncomfortable. It was called yesterday, emergency session. I thanked her and headed back to my office, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Family dinner tonight, 7 p.m. Important matters to discuss. The day dragged on. I tried calling my father twice, but he didn't answer. Olivia's office remained closed, blinds drawn. By 5, most employees had left, and I was gathering my things when Thomas Baker, our legal counsel and my father's golf buddy, stopped by. Josephine, he said, lingering in my doorway. Good work on Porter. Thanks, Tom. It took some convincing, but they finally saw the value proposition. He nodded, looking troubled. Listen, I probably shouldn't say anything, but did you know your father amended the company charter last month? My heart skipped. Amended how? I've said too much. Just be prepared for tonight. The family estate sat on 5 acres outside the city. The sprawling colonial had been home to Hartwells for 3 generations. I parked behind Olivia's Range Rover and took a deep breath before going inside. Dinner was unusually formal. The good china, crystal glasses, even candles. My parents and Olivia were already seated when I arrived. You're late, my father said, though I was precisely on time. Sorry, traffic. I slid into my usual chair. The Porter contract is signed. $20 million over 5 years. Good, he said flatly. No congratulations, no follow-up questions. My mother poured wine. Olivia has wonderful news. The merger with Caldwell Industries is moving forward. Merger? What merger? I put down my fork. We've been competing with Caldwell for years. Times change, Olivia smiled. James Caldwell and I have been discussing possibilities for months. Dad approved the initial talks. Without consulting the operations director? That's my department, and the first I'm hearing about this. My father cleared his throat. That brings us to tonight's discussion. The company is entering a new phase. The Caldwell merger represents our future, and we've decided some restructuring is necessary. I felt my stomach tighten. What kind of restructuring? Leadership consolidation, he replied. The board voted this morning. Olivia will assume the role of CEO, effective immediately. And you? I asked, already knowing the answer. Chairman Emeritus, advisory capacity. Olivia runs the show now. I looked at my sister, who couldn't contain her smirk. Congratulations, I managed. But what does this mean for my position? That's when they dropped the bomb that would change everything. My father's words, "Your sister? She doesn't deserve a dime. She's out," were directed at Olivia, but cut through me like a knife. I sat there, stunned into silence, as they outlined how I would be removed from the company I had helped build, erased from the family legacy I had earned. "What do you mean, out?" I finally asked, my voice steadier than I felt. My father dabbed his mouth with a napkin. "The new corporate structure has no place for your position. The Caldwells are bringing their own operations team. So I'm fired? Just like that? After 12 years? You'll receive 6 months severance," my mother interjected, as if that made it better. "And of course, you'll still be family." "Will I?" I looked around the table. "Because this doesn't feel like family." Olivia sighed dramatically. "Don't be so emotional, Joe. It's business. You're just not the right fit anymore." "Not the right fit?" "I've doubled our efficiency ratings. I secured the Porter contract. I've worked 60-hour weeks for years." "And we appreciate that," my father said dismissively. "But Olivia has the vision for the future. The board agrees." "The board does whatever you tell them to," I countered. My mother's face hardened. "That's enough, Josephine. We've made our decision." I turned to Olivia. "And you're okay with this? Pushing me out of the company I've helped build since I was 22? She shrugged. "The merger is a game changer. James and I have plans that will take Hartwell Caldwell international. You've always been too traditional." "Traditional?" "I've consistently advocated for innovation. You shot down my expansion proposals 3 years in a row." "Those markets were too risky," my father interrupted. "Yet now you're merging with our biggest competitor? The same company that tried to undercut us with the Westridge project?" My father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. The decision is final. You'll receive your severance package on Monday. Clear your office by noon." I looked at each of them, my father's stern face, my mother's averted eyes, Olivia's barely concealed triumph. Something inside me broke. But something else, something stronger, began to form in its place. "And what about Grandma's will?" I asked quietly. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. My grandmother Elizabeth had been the family matriarch, the original co-founder of Hartwell Industries with my grandfather. She died 18 months earlier. "What about it?" My mother's voice had an edge. "She left letters for each of us to be opened on specific dates. Mine is due next month." My father waved dismissively. "Old woman's sentimentality. Nothing of consequence." But I caught the look that passed between my parents. There was something they weren't telling me. "I'm going to ask one more time," I said, standing up. "Is this really how you want things to be?" "It's not personal, Josephine," my father replied. "It's what's best for the company." I nodded slowly. "I understand." And for the first time, I truly did. I drove home to my apartment that night in a daze. 12 years of my life, gone in a single dinner conversation. I poured myself a drink and stared at the city lights through my window. Not tears. Not yet. First, I needed to think. The next morning, I arrived at Hartwell Industries at 7, earlier than most. I wanted to avoid the spectacle. Security had already been informed. They asked for my badge at the entrance. Mark, the guard who'd greeted me every morning for years, couldn't meet my eyes. "I need to clean out my office," I explained. "Ms. Hartwell said you'd be coming," he replied, handing me a visitor's badge. "She said to remind you to be gone by noon." My office door was already open when I arrived. 2 cardboard boxes sat on my desk. Diane stood nearby, clearly uncomfortable. "They asked me to supervise," she said apologetically. "Of course they did." I began emptying my desk drawers. "Did you know? About yesterday's meeting?" She hesitated. "Not until it was happening." I nodded, continuing to pack. Photos, awards, 12 years of my life fitting into 2 small boxes. I reached for the strategy binder I'd compiled, 5 years of market analysis and growth projections. "That stays," Diane said softly. "Mr. Hartwell's orders." I left it on the desk. "Fine." As I packed, colleagues passed by, some stopping briefly to express condolences or awkward goodbyes. Most just hurried past, avoiding eye contact. News traveled fast. By 11, I was nearly finished when Thomas appeared at my door. "This isn't right," he said quietly. "No, it's not. But it's happening anyway." He closed the door behind him. "Josephine, there's something you should know. The merger terms, they're unusual. Hartwell is being severely undervalued." I paused. "What do you mean?" "The Caldwells are paying pennies on the dollar, and there's a clause about liquidating certain assets, including the historical manufacturing site. Grandpa's original factory? They can't sell that. It's been in the family for generations." Thomas looked grim. "They can, and they will. There's more. Your sister and James Caldwell, they've been more than business partners for months." The pieces started falling into place. "So this merger is personal." "Very. And your father is so blinded by the prospect of expanding the Hartwell name internationally that he doesn't see what's happening." I finished packing and picked up my boxes. "Thanks for telling me, Tom." He hesitated. "What will you do now?" I gave him a small smile. "Wait for my grandmother's letter." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur. I declined my parents' calls and ignored Olivia's text asking if I'd calmed down yet. Instead, I focused on healing and planning. I updated my resume, reached out to industry contacts, and tried to envision a life beyond Hartwell Industries. But my grandmother's letter remained at the forefront of my mind. Elizabeth Hartwell had been a force of nature, brilliant, determined, and fiercely protective of what she built. While my grandfather got most of the public recognition, those inside the company knew she was the strategic genius behind Hartwell's early success. Growing up, I'd spent countless afternoons in her office, watching her work, absorbing her wisdom. "Always read the fine print, Josephine," she'd say, "and always have a contingency plan." The day finally arrived. September 17th, exactly 18 months after her death. According to her will, I was to retrieve my letter from her attorney, Wallace Green. His office was in an old brick building downtown. The receptionist led me to a conference room where Wallace waited, a sealed envelope in hand. "Ms. Hartwell," he greeted me. "Your grandmother was quite specific about today." "She usually was," I replied, taking the offered seat. "Before I give you this," he said, "I should inform you that your father called yesterday. He attempted to collect all remaining letters on behalf of the family." I wasn't surprised. "What did you tell him?" "That I'm bound by legal obligation to follow Elizabeth's explicit instructions. Each letter must be delivered to its intended recipient on the specified date." He slid the envelope across the table. "This is yours." The envelope was heavy, sealed with wax bearing my grandmother's initials. Inside was a letter and a small key. "Dear Josephine," the letter began in my grandmother's elegant handwriting. "If you're reading this, I've been gone 18 months, and certain events have likely transpired. I've watched how your father and sister have treated you over the years, the overlooked achievements, the credit given elsewhere, the constant need to prove your worth while others had it handed to them. I remained silent too long out of respect for your father's position as CEO. But in death, I find my voice. Your grandfather and I built Hartwell Industries from nothing. We succeeded because we valued integrity, innovation, and treating people fairly. I fear these principles have been forgotten. The enclosed key opens safe deposit box STR 347 at First National Bank. Inside, you'll find documents that will illuminate much and give you choices. Use this information wisely, not for revenge, but for restoration. I've always seen myself in you, Josephine. Not just your intelligence and work ethic, but your heart. You understand that a company is more than profit margins. It's a legacy, a community, a family. Whatever you decide, know that I am proud of you. With love and faith in your judgment, Grandmother Elizabeth. I read the letter twice, tears blurring my vision. Wallace waited patiently until I composed myself. "Did you know what's in the safe deposit box?" I asked. "I helped her prepare the contents, yes. But the decision of how to use them is entirely yours. Can we go to the bank now?" 20 minutes later, I sat in a private room at First National. staring at the contents of box number 347. There were several folders of documents, legal papers, and a USB drive. The first folder contained proof that my grandmother had never actually transferred her 26% of company shares to my father, as everyone believed. A second document showed she'd been buying shares quietly through a holding company for years. Combined, these shares represented nearly 31% of Hartwell Industries, and they now belonged to me. The second folder held financial records showing discrepancies in the company books, questionable transactions, tax manipulations, and evidence that my father had been siphoning company funds into personal accounts for years. The third contained surveillance photos of Olivia meeting with James Caldwell dating back almost a year, along with copies of emails discussing how to manipulate the company valuation before the merger. The USB drive held recorded conversations between my father and various board members, discussing plans to remove me from the company long before the merger was ever announced. I couldn't find the words. Comprehensive, Wallace supplied. Your grandmother was thorough. But what does this mean legally? It means you own 31% of Hartwell Industries. The merger cannot proceed without your approval, as it requires a 75% shareholder vote. Your father controls 42%, and various board members the remaining 27%. I sat back, absorbing this information. And the financial discrepancies? Evidence of financial misconduct, potentially enough for criminal charges. But that would be an extreme measure that would damage the company itself. I thought of the employees, people who'd worked alongside me for years, whose livelihoods depended on Hartwell Industries. I need time to think, I said finally. Wallace nodded. Of course, but be aware that the merger vote is scheduled for next Friday. I gathered the documents and headed home. For the first time since that dinner, I felt something beyond shock and betrayal. I felt powerful. That night, I spread the documents across my dining table, creating a strategy. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. My plan required perfect timing and the element of surprise. For the next 5 days, I said nothing to my family about grandmother's letter or the safe deposit box. Instead, I arranged meetings with key players who would help me execute what I had in mind. First was Angela Chen, a brilliant corporate attorney who had once been my grandmother's protégé before starting her own practice. I won't lie, Josephine. This will get ugly, she said after reviewing the documents. But you have a rock-solid position. The question is, what do you want? Justice, not revenge, I replied, remembering my grandmother's words. I want to save the company from a bad merger and restore its values. Then we need to move quickly. I'll prepare the injunction against the merger vote and the shareholder recognition documents. Next, I met with Claire Donovan, a respected financial journalist who had covered Hartwell Industries for years. This is explosive, she said, examining the evidence of financial misconduct. But you're sure you want this held in reserve rather than published immediately? Absolutely. This is leverage, not a first strike. I'm hoping it never becomes necessary to make it public. My third meeting was with David Miller, who had been head of manufacturing at Hartwell until my father pushed him into early retirement 3 years ago. I never thought I'd see these hallways again, he said as we walked through the original Hartwell factory, the one the Caldwells planned to liquidate after the merger. You know they're telling everyone this place is obsolete? Is it? He scoffed. With some modernization, this facility could produce our new medical device components line at 20% less cost than outsourcing. I ran the numbers before I left. Your father wasn't interested. I am, I told him. Would you be willing to come back? Help me make this place what it should be? He studied my face. You're serious about this? Completely. Then I'm in. Finally, I reached out to 4 board members I believed might be persuaded to support me if given the right information. Small meetings, private conversations, carefully presented evidence. By Thursday night, I had tentative commitments from 3 of them. The merger vote was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. I arrived at Hartwell headquarters at 1:30, dressed in my most professional suit, Angela beside me. We were stopped at reception. Ms. Hartwell no longer has access to the building, the receptionist said nervously. Please call Thomas Baker, I replied calmly. Minutes later, Thomas appeared, surprised but pleased to see me. Josephine, this is unexpected. I'm here for the merger vote. He glanced at Angela, then back to me. I'm afraid that's not possible. You're no longer a voting shareholder? I finished for him. Actually, I am, and we have documentation proving it. His eyes widened slightly. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No need. We're heading to the boardroom now. The boardroom was already full when we entered. My father at the head of the table, Olivia to his right, James Caldwell beside her, board members filling the remaining seats. Presentations had been made. They were minutes away from the vote. All conversation stopped when I walked in. Josephine, my father recovered first. This is a closed meeting. You need to leave. Actually, I don't. I nodded to Angela, who began distributing documents to everyone present. As the owner of 31% of Hartwell Industries shares, I have every right to be here. The room erupted. My father's face turned red. This is absurd. You don't own any shares. Grandmother never transferred her shares to you, I replied calmly. And she purchased more over the years. It's all legally documented, as you can see in the papers before you. James Caldwell stood up. What kind of stunt is this? We have a binding agreement. Contingent on shareholder approval, Angela interjected, which requires 75% vote. Mathematically impossible without Ms. Hartwell's shares. Olivia stared at me, her expression shifting from shock to fury. You can't do this. I already have. I've also filed an injunction against the merger pending a full financial audit of Hartwell Industries. My father slammed his hand on the table. You have no grounds. I have evidence of financial irregularities that would interest both the SEC and the IRS. I kept my voice level. But I'd prefer to resolve this privately, as a family matter. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. I placed a folder on the table and slid it toward my father. My terms, I said simply. The folder contained a single document, my proposed resolution. As my father read it, his face cycled through anger, disbelief, and finally, something approaching respect. You want the company, he said flatly. I want to save it from a merger that severely undervalues our worth and would dismantle parts of our legacy. I turned to address the entire board. The terms proposed by Caldwell Industries would result in selling our historical manufacturing site, laying off 20% of our workforce, and essentially surrendering our brand identity while keeping the Hartwell name as window dressing. James Caldwell stood up. These accusations are baseless. Our proposal clearly states— I've read the proposal, I interrupted, including Section 12.3 regarding operational redundancies and Appendix C detailing the asset liquidation timeline. Have all the board members reviewed those sections in detail? From their expressions, it was clear many hadn't. What exactly are you proposing? Asked Catherine Zhao, one of the board members I'd spoken with earlier. A restructuring, not a merger. Hartwell Industries remains independent. My father steps down as CEO but remains on the board as chairman emeritus, as he planned. I assume the role of CEO. The original manufacturing site is modernized for our new medical components line rather than liquidated, and we pursue strategic partnerships rather than full merger with companies that complement our strengths. Ridiculous, Olivia scoffed. You don't have the experience to be CEO. I have 12 years of operational experience with this company. I know every department, every major client, and most of the employees by name. What I lack in executive experience, I'll supplement with a strong executive team. I nodded toward the door where David Miller waited, including bringing back talent we never should have lost. My father was studying me with new eyes. And if we refuse? I took a deep breath. Then I call for an immediate vote on the Caldwell merger, which will fail without my shares. I proceed with the injunction and financial audit, and I release the evidence of financial misconduct to the appropriate authorities. You'd destroy your own family? My mother spoke for the first time, her voice shaking. I'd hold them accountable, I corrected. The same way they've always held me to higher standards than anyone else in this room. Thomas Baker cleared his throat. Perhaps we should postpone the merger vote and consider Ms. Hartwell's proposal. Legally speaking, she holds a position that cannot be ignored. My father and I locked eyes across the table. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had once been proud of my achievements before ambition and favoritism clouded his judgment. "We'll recess for 30 minutes, he announced finally. "Josephine, my office." The executive office hadn't changed. Same imposing desk, same wall of awards, same view of the city. My father closed the door behind us. "Your grandmother," he said, pouring himself a drink. I should have known she'd have contingencies. She believed in being prepared. He took a long sip. "Why didn't you just come to me with this? Why the ambush? Would you have listened? Or would you have found a way to dismiss me, like you always have?" He didn't answer immediately. "You're taking a major risk. CEO is a different game than operations." "I know, but I've been watching and learning for 12 years. "And Olivia? What happens to her in this scenario of yours?" I'd considered this carefully. "She keeps her position as VP of Business Development. Her relationship-building skills are valuable, and she has connections we need. But the Caldwell merger is off the table." He nodded slowly. "James won't be happy. James was using her to get Hartwell at a bargain price. She deserves better, even if she doesn't see it yet." My father set his glass down and looked at me. Really looked at me. Perhaps for the first time in years. "You found a way to save the company, secure your position, and protect your sister, all while holding leverage over me that could send me to prison. That was never my goal. But you could have made it happen." He almost smiled. "You're more like your grandmother than I realized." "Is that a compliment? From me?" "Yes." He sighed heavily. "The board will follow my recommendation. And my recommendation will be to accept your terms with some negotiation on the details." I felt a wave of relief, quickly tempered by caution. "And the financial irregularities?" "Will be corrected, discreetly and thoroughly." I nodded. It wasn't a complete admission, but it was a start. "Thank you." He shook his head. "Don't thank me. You earned this. Forced my hand, outmaneuvered me. Part of me is furious. But another part—" "What?" "Is proud." The words seemed to cost him something to say. "Don't mess it up." Coming from my father, this was practically a standing ovation. We returned to the boardroom where anxious faces awaited us. My father took his place at the head of the table. "After discussion with Josephine, I am recommending the board reject the Caldwell merger proposal and instead adopt a restructuring plan with Josephine Hartwell as CEO, effective immediately." The shock in the room was palpable. Olivia looked like she'd been slapped. James Caldwell stood up, his face red with anger. "This is a breach of our agreement. You'll be hearing from our attorneys." "I think you'll find the preliminary agreement had multiple exit clauses," Angela replied smoothly. "We're prepared to discuss a fair dissolution of the merger talks." As Caldwell stormed out, I caught Olivia's eye. The hurt and betrayal I saw there mirrored what I had felt at that family dinner weeks ago. But there was something else too. A glimmer of respect, perhaps, or at least recognition that I was not who she thought I was. The board voted. The merger was rejected. My appointment was approved, with only 2 dissenting votes. As the meeting adjourned, board members came to congratulate me, some genuinely, others clearly hedging their bets with the new power structure. Through it all, I maintained my composure. This wasn't a victory lap. It was day 1 of the hardest job I'd ever undertaken. The first month as CEO was a whirlwind. I worked 18-hour days, meeting with department heads, reviewing operations, and communicating my vision for Hartwell's future. Many employees were surprised by the sudden change in leadership. Others seemed relieved. I moved into the CEO office but made significant changes, replacing the imposing mahogany desk with a more modern, approachable setup, adding comfortable seating for informal meetings, and displaying photos of employees receiving recognition alongside the usual corporate awards. My father, true to his word, stepped into the chairman emeritus role. He offered advice when asked, but largely stayed out of day-to-day operations. We established a weekly lunch meeting, neutral territory at a restaurant halfway between the office and his home, where we gradually began rebuilding our relationship on new terms. Olivia was the greater challenge. After the board meeting, she disappeared for a week, not answering calls or texts. When she finally returned, she was coldly professional, speaking to me only when necessary about business matters. 3 weeks into my new role, I asked her to meet me for coffee at the small shop across from headquarters. "I don't have time for social calls," she said when she arrived, remaining standing while I sat at a corner table. "It's not social. It's about your role going forward." That got her attention. She sat down reluctantly. "Are you firing me now? Completing your takeover?" "Actually, I'm promoting you." She blinked in surprise. "What?" "We're launching an international division, focusing initially on European markets. I want you to head it." "Why would you do that after everything that happened?" I pushed a folder across the table. "Because you were right about one thing. We need to expand internationally. Your proposal 3 years ago for European expansion was solid. Dad rejected it because the timing wasn't right, but now it is." She opened the folder cautiously, reviewing the plans I'd outlined. "This is my original proposal, with updates. Yes, you did good work. It deserved to be implemented." She studied me with suspicion. "What's the catch? You send me to Europe to get me out of the way." "Partly," I admitted. "We both need some space, but mainly because you're the right person for the job. You speak 3 languages, you understand those markets, and you've already built relationships with potential partners there. Including James," she said quietly. "That's your business. Professionally, Caldwell Industries could still be a valuable partner in limited ways, just not a merger." She was silent for a long moment, turning pages in the folder. "Did you know about the financial issues before grandmother's letter?" I suspected something wasn't right. The numbers in some reports didn't add up, but I didn't know the extent. Neither did I. She looked up, her expression earnest for once. "I knew Dad favored me. I took advantage of that. But I didn't know about the financial manipulation." I believed her. Olivia had many flaws, but she wasn't dishonest about business matters. "Which is why I'm still offering you this position. You're ambitious and sometimes ruthless, but you're not corrupt. Unlike Dad, her loyalty still showed. Dad made mistakes. He's addressing them now." She closed the folder. "I'll think about it. That's all I ask." To my surprise, she accepted the position 3 days later. Within 2 weeks, she relocated to our new London office. Our relationship remained complicated, but a tentative professional respect began to develop. Meanwhile, I focused on implementing my vision for Hartwell's future. The modernization of the original manufacturing facility became my flagship project. David Miller came out of retirement to oversee the transformation, bringing with him innovative ideas that had been previously ignored. "Your grandfather would be proud," he told me as we toured the partially renovated facility. "He always said this place had good bones." "And my grandmother?" He smiled. "She'd say it's about time someone remembered where we came from while still looking forward." By the end of the 3rd month, our stock price had stabilized after the initial shock of the leadership change and canceled merger. The medical components line was in development, with promising early results. Employee morale improved as I implemented changes that recognized and rewarded talent at all levels. Not everything was smooth. Some longtime executives who had been loyal to my father resisted my leadership style. The Caldwells, though they ultimately backed down from legal threats, spread industry rumors questioning my qualifications. And the financial cleanup was painful, requiring significant adjustments to our books and a carefully managed disclosure to financial authorities that resulted in penalties but avoided criminal charges. Through it all, I kept returning to the lessons my grandmother had taught me. Integrity first, people matter, and always, always have a contingency plan. One evening, about 4 months after taking over as CEO, I stayed late at the office, reviewing quarterly projections. A soft knock at my door interrupted my concentration. "Come in," I called, expecting the security guard making his rounds. Instead, my mother entered, looking uncertain. We hadn't spoken privately since the night of that fateful dinner. "Your assistant said I might find you here," she said. I was just finishing up. I closed my laptop. "What brings you by?" She glanced around the redecorated office. "It looks different, brighter." That was the idea. She nodded, then reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I was going through some old papers and found this. I thought you should have it." I took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a photograph I'd never seen before. My grandmother standing in front of the original Hartwell factory, arm in arm with my grandfather on what appeared to be opening day. They looked young, determined, and wildly happy. "She gave me that years ago," my mother said. "Said it was taken the day they realized they'd actually done it. Built something that would last." I felt a lump in my throat. "Thank you for bringing this. Your father would never admit it, but you're doing a good job. The company feels healthier somehow. We still have a long way to go." She hesitated, then sat in one of the visitor chairs. "I owe you an apology, Josephine. I should have spoken up that night at dinner. I knew it was wrong, how they were treating you." "Why didn't you?" She looked down at her hands. "It was easier not to. I've been taking the easy path with your father for so long I forgot there were other options." It wasn't a complete explanation, but it was honest. "I appreciate you saying that. Will you come to dinner sometime? Not the formal family dinner, just a meal together. Start over, maybe." I considered her request. The hurt was still there, but holding on to anger wouldn't help any of us move forward. "I'd like that. Not right away, but soon." She nodded, understanding the boundary. "That's fair." She stood to leave, then paused. "Elizabeth always said you were the heart of Hartwell." I'm starting to see what she meant. After she left, I placed the photograph on my desk, next to the modern awards and employee recognition photos. Past and present, side by side, just as it should be. 6 months into my tenure as CEO, Hartwell Industries hosted its annual company-wide meeting. Traditionally a dry affair focused on financial results and corporate goals, I decided to transform it into a genuine celebration of our people and our history. We held it at the original manufacturing facility, now partially modernized with gleaming new equipment alongside carefully preserved historical elements. Over 300 employees gathered in the main production area, which we'd cleared and set up with chairs, a stage, and displays highlighting both our heritage and future direction. I took the stage after brief introductions, looking out at the faces of people who had been part of my professional journey for years. Some who had welcomed me on my first day in the warehouse, others who were recent hires brought on for our expansion. "Thank you all for being here today," I began. When my grandparents founded Hartwell Industries 68 years ago, they had 2 guiding principles. First, build products that matter. Second, treat people with respect. Somewhere along the way, we started focusing more on quarterly reports than on these foundational values. Today marks our return to those principles. I outlined our vision moving forward: the medical components division that would create life-saving devices, the modernization of our original facility, the international expansion, and most importantly, our renewed commitment to treating employees, customers, and our community with integrity. Many of you have been with Hartwell through multiple leadership changes, I acknowledged. Some of you remember my grandmother walking these floors, checking quality, knowing everyone by name. Others only know the corporate headquarters downtown. But all of you are part of the Hartwell legacy. I announced new initiatives: improved benefits, a profit-sharing program, educational assistance, and a foundation to support the local community. With each announcement, I could feel the energy in the room shifting from skepticism to cautious optimism. Finally, I said, I want to address the changes in leadership that occurred 6 months ago. There have been rumors, questions, and uncertainty. I understand that. Today, I'm asking for your trust, not blind faith, but a chance to prove through actions that Hartwell's best days are ahead of us. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous, but it was genuine. As I mingled with employees afterward, many shared stories of their time with the company, including memories of my grandmother that I'd never heard before. "She always said you'd be running this place someday," confided Margaret from accounting, who had been with Hartwell for 35 years. "Even when you were just a teenager, following her around during summer breaks." "I wish she could see it now," I replied. "Oh, she sees it," Margaret smiled. "And she's probably saying about time." That evening, I hosted a smaller dinner for department heads and key team members at a local restaurant. My father attended as chairman emeritus, making his first public appearance alongside me since the transition. He kept his remarks brief but supportive, raising a toast to Hartwell's future under capable new leadership. Later, as the evening wound down, he pulled me aside. "You did well today," he said. "Elizabeth would have approved." "High praise, coming from you." He nodded, acknowledging the weight of his words. "I've been thinking about what happened with the merger, with how things went down. And I was wrong." The admission clearly cost him. "Not just about the merger, but about how I treated you for years. I convinced myself I was being hard on you for your own good, making you earn your place. But with Olivia, you gave her everything I had to fight for," I finished. "Yes." He looked genuinely regretful. "I don't expect you to forgive that overnight. Or ever, maybe. But I want you to know I see it now." It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was more than I'd ever expected from my proud, stubborn father. "Thank you for saying that." As spring turned to summer, the changes at Hartwell began bearing fruit. The medical components line received FDA approval ahead of schedule. Our first European contracts, negotiated by Olivia, exceeded revenue projections. Employee retention improved dramatically, and we began attracting talent from competitors. I developed a routine, balancing the demands of leadership with personal time, something my father had never managed. 3 mornings a week, I started my day at the original factory, walking the floor, speaking with workers, seeing our products take shape firsthand. Other days, I worked from headquarters, focusing on strategy and broader business concerns. Every Friday afternoon, I set aside time for what I called innovation hours, when any employee could schedule 15 minutes to pitch ideas directly to me. Many were impractical, but some were brilliant, including a sustainability initiative proposed by a junior engineer that would reduce our environmental footprint while cutting energy costs. Olivia and I established a weekly video call to discuss the European operations. Our conversations remained primarily professional, but occasionally veered into more personal territory. During one such call, she surprised me. "I've been dating someone," she said after our business discussion concluded. "Not James. That ended shortly after I moved here." "I'm glad to hear it. Is it serious?" "It might be." She actually smiled. Not the calculated smile I was used to, but something more genuine. "He's not impressed by the Hartwell name or money. It's different." "Different can be good." She nodded, then asked hesitantly, "Would you come visit the London office next month? See what we've built here? Maybe meet him?" It was the first personal invitation she'd extended since our rift. "I'd like that." The London trip proved to be a turning point in our relationship. Seeing Olivia in her element, confident, respected, building something of her own without our father's shadow, changed my perception of her. And perhaps seeing me appreciate her work changed her view of me as well. Her boyfriend, Daniel, was a literature professor with no interest in business, about as far from James Caldwell as one could get. Over dinner at her London flat, the 3 of us found ourselves laughing about childhood memories I hadn't revisited in years. "Remember when Dad caught us using his office chairs for racing down the hallway?" Olivia asked. "You blamed it entirely on me," I reminded her. "Of course I did. I was 7 and you were 10. It was your job to take the fall." We laughed, and for a moment, I glimpsed what our relationship could have been without the competition our father had fostered between us. Back in the States, I continued building Hartwell according to my vision. The financial situation stabilized completely. The board, once skeptical of my leadership, now fully supported my initiatives. Even my mother found a role, heading the newly established Hartwell Foundation that supported education and community development. 1 year after taking over as CEO, I stood once again in my grandmother's attorney's office. "You've done remarkable things with Hartwell," Wallace said, reviewing our annual report. "Elizabeth would be proud." "I hope so. There were times I wasn't sure we'd make it." He smiled. "She never doubted you would. That's why she left you this." He handed me another envelope smaller than the first. "To be delivered 1 year after the first letter, assuming you took the path she hoped you would." Inside was a single key and a short note. "The lake house is yours now. It's where I did my best thinking, and where I wrote my most important letters. Use it well. With love, grandmother." The lake house had been my grandmother's personal retreat, a beautiful but modest cabin where she spent weekends away from the demands of business. I'd visited often as a child but hadn't been there in years. That weekend, I drove the 2 hours to the lake, using the key to open a place frozen in time. Everything was exactly as she had left it. Books on shelves, a cardigan draped over a chair, her favorite teacup in the kitchen cabinet. In her study, I found a leather-bound journal with my name written on the first page. Inside were pages of her thoughts, advice, and reflections, written over years, intended for me to find when I was ready. The final entry, dated just weeks before her death, read, "Josephine, if you're reading this, you've reclaimed what was always meant to be yours. Remember that leadership isn't about power, it's about vision and service. The company bears our name, but more importantly, it bears our values. Never forget where we came from, and never stop imagining where we might go. The legacy is in your hands now. Make it your own." I sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset over the lake, feeling my grandmother's presence all around me. The path to this moment had been harder than I could have imagined, filled with betrayal and hurt, but also with growth and unexpected reconciliation. Hartwell Industries was thriving under my leadership, not because I had all the answers, but because I remembered what mattered most: the people who built it, the values that sustained it, and the vision that continued to guide it forward. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Just landed. Dinner tomorrow night with Mom and Dad? They're actually behaving like normal people these days." I smiled and replied, "Wouldn't miss it." 18 months after becoming CEO of Hartwell Industries, I stood at the podium in our newly renovated conference center, addressing shareholders at our annual meeting. The room was packed, attendance higher than in previous years, drawn by our remarkable turnaround story and consistent growth. "When I took this position," I began, "Hartwell Industries stood at a crossroads. Today, I'm pleased to report we've chosen the right path." I presented the numbers: revenue up 22%, profit margins improved by 15%, employee retention at an all-time high, and our stock price reflecting the market's confidence in our direction. But more importantly, I shared the stories behind those numbers: the lives improved by our medical components, the communities supported by our foundation, the employees whose innovative ideas had been implemented. The Hartwell name has always stood for quality, I concluded. Today, it also stands for integrity, innovation, and inclusion. Thank you for your continued trust in our vision." The applause was gratifying, but the approving nod from my father in the front row meant more than I expected. He had gradually transitioned from skeptic to supporter, offering guidance when asked, but respecting my leadership. Our relationship had found a new equilibrium, not perfect, but stronger than before. After the meeting, we hosted a reception for major shareholders and board members. Thomas Baker approached me, champagne in hand. "Impressive presentation," he said, "and even more impressive results." "Thank you, Tom. Couldn't have done it without your support during the transition. I always knew you had it in you, even when Richard couldn't see it." He lowered his voice. "Speaking of Richard, he mentioned he's considering stepping down as chairman emeritus next year. Wants to actually retire." This was news to me. "Did he say who he's recommending as replacement?" Thomas smiled. "He said that's entirely your decision now, and that whoever you choose, he trusts your judgment." Coming from my father, This was extraordinary. Before I could respond, Catherine Zhao, one of our board members, joined us. Josephine, I just heard from the Westridge Hospital System. They've approved the full order for our cardiac monitoring components. It's their largest medical technology investment this year. That's fantastic news. David will be thrilled. His team has been working on that bid for months. It wasn't just the technology that won them over, Catherine added. Their purchasing committee specifically mentioned our company values and community engagement as deciding factors. I excused myself to share the news with David Miller, who had become one of my most trusted advisors. I found him chatting with my mother near the refreshment table. Westridge said yes, I told him. His face lit up. All of it? The full implementation? Every last piece. We'll need to scale up production on the new line immediately. The team is ready, he assured me. We've been preparing for this. My mother touched my arm. I'm heading out, but I wanted to tell you how proud I am. Not just of the business success, but of how you've handled everything. Thank you, Mom. Your father may not say it enough, but he feels the same way. After she left, I circulated through the reception, speaking with shareholders and board members, answering questions about our future plans. Many remarked on the changed atmosphere at Hartwell, more transparent, more energetic, more focused. Later that evening, I returned to my office to collect my things before heading home. On my desk was a small gift box with a card from Olivia, who had flown in for the shareholders' meeting but had to return to London immediately afterward. The card read, "Couldn't say this in person because it's still awkward, but you've done amazing things with the company. Grandma was right about you. P.S. Daniel and I are engaged. Wedding details to follow. Try to act surprised when Mom calls you with the news." Inside the box was a vintage fountain pen that had belonged to our grandfather, a peace offering of sorts, and acknowledgement of my place in the family legacy. I smiled, remembering how far we'd come from that dinner table where they'd told me I didn't deserve a dime. The following weekend, I visited the lake house again. It had become my retreat, just as it had been for my grandmother. I'd made few changes, some modern amenities, a dedicated office space, but the character remained untouched. On the dock overlooking the water, I reread portions of my grandmother's journal, finding new insights with each visit. One passage particularly resonated that day. True leadership isn't measured by titles or wealth, but by impact, on people, on communities, on the future. The Hartwell name opens doors, but what you do once those doors are open defines your legacy. As the sun set over the lake, I reflected on the journey of the past 18 months. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had instead transformed me. The company that had almost slipped away was now stronger than ever under my guidance. The family that had fractured was slowly healing, finding new ways to connect. I'd taken back what was rightfully mine, not just shares in a company, but my place in the legacy my grandparents had built. And in doing so, I'd discovered strengths I never knew I possessed, and forged relationships I never thought possible. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was my father. "Just checking to see if you're coming to dinner tomorrow," he said. "Your mother's making that pasta you like." "I'll be there," I promised. "Good. I wanted to discuss something with you, about the future of the company. Some ideas I've been considering. Once those words would have filled me with dread. Now they sparked curiosity. I'd like to hear them." "See you tomorrow then." He paused. "Josephine?" "Yes?" "You've done well. Better than I could have." Simple words, but from him they meant everything. I hung up and looked out over the peaceful lake. My grandmother had left me more than a company. She'd given me the courage to stand up for myself, the wisdom to lead with integrity, and the perspective to value what truly mattered. The legacy was mine now, not because it had been handed to me, but because I had earned it. And I would continue to build it, day by day, decision by decision, with the same determination that had guided my grandparents when they first opened the doors of Hartwell Industries. They said I didn't deserve a dime. They were wrong. And I had proved it not by fighting, not by vengeance, but by leading with vision, purpose, and heart. The company now wore my influence in every decision. The estate was in caring hands. And my family? They were still adjusting to the fact that I had found the strength to walk away and then return on my own terms, without burning bridges that could one day be rebuilt. Some legacies are inherited. The best ones are earned. Mine was both. A gift from my grandmother, claimed through my own determination, and now shaped by my vision for the future. As the stars appeared above the lake, I smiled, knowing wherever she was, my grandmother was smiling too.